Jamal Washington, a 17-year-old who had survived 3 years on the unforgiving streets by adhering to one ironclad rule: never get involved. Crouched behind a dumpster in a downtown alley, the rain hammering down in relentless sheets, transforming the city into a maze of glistening black rivers that reflected the neon glow of distant signs. The cold October night seeped through his thin jacket, chilling him to the bone, but he barely noticed. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, 2 days empty, and he waited patiently for the Chinese restaurant backing the alley to toss out its leftovers, a ritual he'd learned to time perfectly. Survival demanded vigilance, and Jamal had honed his senses to a razor's edge, watching, waiting, staying invisible. His dark eyes scanned the steady stream of legs, hurrying past the alley's mouth umbrellas, shielding their owners from the downpour. Nobody lingered in this weather, nobody except those like him, with nowhere else to go. He pulled his jacket tighter, though it offered little protection against the damp chill that clung to his skin. 3 years on the streets had stripped away any illusions of comfort. The only thing that mattered was staying alert, staying alive. The rain drummed against the fire escape above, creating a curtain of water that blurred his view of the street. But through the haze, he could see the warm glow of shops across the way. A bookstore, where he sometimes slipped in to warm up until the staff shooed him out a coffee shop that occasionally offered day-old pastries if the kind manager was on shift. An electronics store with TVs in the window flashing images of a world he'd once been part of. That world felt like a distant memory now. A small apartment, with his mother's school friends' dreams of a future, before it all unraveled. Before his mother started asking dangerous questions at the clinic where she worked. Before she vanished one night without a trace. Before child services tried to place him in a foster home, where the older kids made it clear what happened to those too small, too young, too vulnerable. The streets were brutal, but they were honest. Out here, he could run, he could hide, he could survive. A flicker of movement at the far end of the alley snapped him out of his thoughts. 2 men emerged from the shadows, their silhouettes barely discernible through the rain. Jamal pressed himself flatter against the damp brick wall, blending into the darkness. This was his territory, and he knew every inch, every loose brick, every rusted ladder, every hiding spot. The men moved with purpose, their steps deliberate, but something about them set his nerves on edge. He'd seen plenty of deals go down in alleys like this: drugs, weapons, stolen goods. And he knew the rhythm of those transactions, the jittery glances of dealers, the swagger of buyers. These men were different, too clean, too precise, their polished shoes clicking against the wet pavement with a military cadence. They stopped about 30 feet from his hiding spot, standing under a flickering streetlight that cast intermittent light on their faces. The taller one, white mid-30s, had close-cropped hair and a scar slicing through his left eyebrow, a pale line that caught the light. The shorter one, also white same age, wore wire-rimmed glasses that glinted as he turned his head. "You have it," the tall one asked, his voice low, carrying a faint accent Jamal couldn't place. Eastern European, maybe. "Of course," the other replied, reaching into his coat to produce a small device, a flash drive. But unlike any Jamal had seen it surface alive with a digital display scrolling numbers. "This will give us access to everything, every patrol route, every officer's schedule, every radio frequency. The encryption took months to crack, but it's all here." The tall man took the drive, inspecting it closely before pulling a police radio from his pocket. Jamal's blood ran cold. These weren't cops, he was certain of that, so why did they have police equipment? He watched, heart pounding, as the man with glasses opened a hidden panel on the radio's side, inserting the flash drive. The radio's display flared with strange symbols before settling back to normal. "How long until it uploads?" the tall man asked. "It's already done," his partner replied. Every radio on this frequency is now compromised. We'll hear everything they hear, know everything they know. Good, the tall man said. And if anyone suspects, they won't. The virus is undetectable, unless you know exactly what to look for. Footsteps echoed from the street, sharp and purposeful, cutting through the rain's steady drone. Both men tensed their hands, drifting toward their waists, where Jamal knew weapons were concealed. A figure appeared at the alley's entrance, a police officer, her silhouette unmistakable despite the downpour. Officer Clara Hayes walked with the confidence of someone who owned these streets, her hand resting casually on her service weapon. Young, maybe late 20s, with sharp eyes that scanned the alley, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun under her rain-slicked cap. "Evening, gentlemen," she called, her voice firm, authoritative, despite her small frame. "Everything all right here?" The two men exchanged a quick glance, and the tall one forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just getting out of the rain, officer. My friend here was showing me a shortcut to the subway." Clara stepped closer, her eyes narrowing slightly. She'd been a cop long enough to sense when something was off. "The subway's 3 blocks that way," she said, pointing toward the street. "This alley's a dead end." "Is it the man with glasses?" said, his tone shifting from nervous to something colder, more calculated. He took a step forward, his posture changing, moving with a predatory grace that made Jamal's stomach tighten. How embarrassing. We must have gotten turned around. Happens to everyone in this weather. Clara's hand shifted closer to her weapon, her voice steady but firm. "Why don't you gentlemen head back to the street? I'll point you in the right direction." The tall man moved subtly, positioning himself to Clara's left, while the other edged to her right. Jamal recognized the tactic. They were flanking her, boxing her in. His pulse raced as he realized what was coming. They couldn't let her walk away, not after what she might have overheard, not after what she'd seen. From his hiding spot, Jamal caught a glint of metal as the man with glasses reached into his coat, his fingers wrapping around something, a knife maybe, or a silenced pistol. Clara had seconds at most. Jamal's mind screamed at him to stay hidden. Getting involved was suicide. These men weren't street thugs. They were professionals, dangerous in ways he couldn't match. And Clara was a cop, part of the same system that had failed his mother, that had hounded him from doorways and chased him from warm buildings. Why should he care what happened to her? But something in Clara's stance stopped him, the way she stood, unafraid, her eyes sharp with a determination that reminded him of his mother, of her need to protect, to help. Before he could second-guess himself, Jamal burst from his hiding place, his worn sneakers slapping against the wet pavement. The men turned toward the sound, startled, their focus breaking for a split second. He didn't shout. A warning words would take too long. Instead, he crashed into Clara from the side, his hand clamping over her mouth as they stumbled toward the wall. Her training kicked in instantly. Her elbow drove back into his ribs, her free hand reaching for her weapon. "Don't talk," he whispered urgently in her ear, his voice raw with desperation. "Just listen, please." Clara's body was rigid, ready to throw him off, to arrest him. But something in his tone, fear not malice, made her pause. Her wide, adrenaline-fueled eyes met his, and she saw the terror there. This wasn't an attack. It was a warning. The two men recovered quickly, moving toward them now. The tall one's hand was inside his jacket, and the other had drawn a tactical knife, its blade gleaming in the flickering streetlight. "Let her go, kid," the tall one said, his accent thicker now. "This doesn't concern you." Jamal kept his grip on Clara, pulling her back toward the shadows of the alley. "Your radio," he whispered, so quiet she could barely hear. "They did something to your radio." Clara's hand went to the device on her belt, and she froze as she heard it, a faint rhythmic clicking, not static, but deliberate, like it was transmitting. Her entire body went rigid with understanding. These men weren't just criminals. They were something far worse. And this homeless kid had just saved her life. Smart boy. The man with glasses said, stepping closer, his knife catching the light. But not smart enough. Officer Hayes, we really need you to come with us. Quietly. They knew her name. Clara's blood turned to ice. This wasn't random, they'd been waiting for her. Run, she whispered to Jamal, her hand finding her weapon. When I move, you run. But Jamal didn't let go. Instead, he pulled her backward toward a narrow gap between the buildings, one she hadn't even noticed. Trust me, he whispered. I know these alleys better than anyone. The clicking from her radio grew louder, and now other sounds joined it, voices distant, but closing in. The two men smiled. Backup's coming, the tall one said, but not the kind you're hoping for, Officer Hayes. Clara understood then whoever was coming, they weren't her allies. The radio wasn't just compromised. It was being used to coordinate something bigger. Something that involved cops, who weren't cops at all. She made her choice. Instead of drawing her weapon, she let Jamal pull her into the gap, into the darkness where the rain couldn't reach. Behind them, she heard the men curse and give chase. But Jamal was already moving his hand in hers, guiding her through a labyrinth of passages she didn't know existed. They ran, splashing through puddles, climbing over chain-link fences, squeezing through spaces that seemed too small for an adult. Clara's radio continued its ominous clicking, and she wanted to rip it off to throw it away, but Jamal stopped her. "Keep it!" he panted as they paused in another shadowed alcove. "We need to know what they're doing." She looked at this kid, skinny, soaked, probably starving, who'd risked everything to save a cop he didn't even know. Why, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why help me? Jamal's eyes were old, far too old for his 17 years, because nobody listened before he said. And someone died because of it. They crouched in the darkness of a loading dock, their breathing heavy from the run. Clara's mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. This teenager, this homeless kid, had saved her from something she didn't yet fully understand. "Start talking," she said, keeping her voice low. "What did you see exactly?" Jamal peered around the corner, checking for pursuit before answering. Two men. They had a flash drive, something high-tech. They plugged it into a police radio, your kind of radio. Said something about uploading a virus, compromising every radio on the frequency. Clara's hand went to her radio again. The clicking had stopped, but that only made it worse. "You're telling me my entire precinct's communications might be compromised?" "That's what they said," Jamal replied, water dripping from his soaked hair. "Every patrol route, every schedule. And they knew your name, Officer Hayes." This wasn't random. Clara studied him in the dim light. He was younger than she'd first thought. Maybe 16 or 17. His clothes worn, but clean. His eyes sharp, with an intelligence the streets hadn't dulled. "Should arrest you," she said, half serious. "You grabbed an officer, put your hand over my mouth. That's assault." "Yeah, well, you're welcome for saving your life," he shot back. No anger in his voice, just a tired resignation. "What's your name?" He hesitated. "Jamal." Just Jamal. Clara knew better than to push. Street kids had their reasons for keeping secrets. "Okay, just Jamal. Those men described them. Everything you can remember." Jamal closed his eyes, his face shifting, becoming focused in a way that surprised her. The tall one about 6'2", maybe 190 white. Mid-30s scar through his left eyebrow, old probably from a knife. Military bearing, the way he stood moved. Had an accent, Eastern European, maybe Serbian or Croatian. The shorter one, maybe 5'10", 160 glasses, wire-rimmed, also white, same age range. Nervous tic kept adjusting his glasses when he talked. Soft hands, no calluses tech guy, not a fighter, but he had a knife, tactical, probably ceramic, from the way it looked. Clara stared at him, scribbling notes despite the rain. You saw all that in the dark. Jamal shrugged. You learn to notice things when your life depends on it. The tall one had a tattoo on his neck, just visible above his collar, Cyrillic writing. And they both wore boots, expensive ones, tactical, but trying to look civilian. These weren't the observations of a typical street kid. Where did you learn to do that? My mom was a nurse, Jamal said quietly. She taught me to pay attention to details, said it could save someone's life someday. She's gone. Before Clara could ask more, the sound of engines echoed through the loading dock. She peered out and saw a black van, the same one from the alley, cruising slowly past its windows tinted too dark to be legal. That's them, Jamal whispered. Clara reached for her radio, then stopped. If it was compromised using, it would be a death sentence. She pulled out her cell phone instead, but Jamal grabbed her wrist. You can't. They knew your name, knew your route. Someone in your department is feeding them information. You call this in, and whoever's dirty will know exactly where we are. Clara wanted to argue, but his logic was airtight. Then, what do you suggest? We follow them. Find out what they're really doing. We know. This is police business. I'm getting you somewhere safe, and then what? You'll trust the same people who might have set you up. Jamal's voice was harder now, his eyes fierce. You don't get it. These aren't regular criminals. The tech? They had the way they moved. This is something bigger. Clara studied him again. There was something he wasn't telling her, something personal driving him. Why do you care? Why risk your neck for a cop? Jamal looked away, his jaw tight. I told you. Someone died because nobody listened. Your mother. He nodded, barely perceptible. She was a whistleblower, tried to expose something at the clinic where she worked. Files going missing, patient records being altered. She went to the police, but nothing happened. Then one night she just disappeared. Cops said she probably ran off, abandoned me. But I know better. Clara felt a pang in her chest. She'd become a cop because of her own loss. Her younger brother killed in a gang shooting at 15. She'd wanted to make a difference to protect kids like him, kids like Jamal. The van had stopped at the end of the block. Clara made a decision that broke every protocol she'd been trained to follow. Okay, she said. We follow them, but we do this my way. You stay behind me, you do exactly what I say, and if things go bad, you run. Understood? Jamal nodded, but his eyes told her he had no intention of running. They moved through the rain-soaked streets, keeping to the shadows, tracking the van as it wound deeper into the warehouse district, where streetlights were scarce, and the buildings loomed like silent giants. Clara's radio crackled occasionally bursts of static that might have been chatter or the virus doing its work. Jamal pointed as the van pulled into a warehouse, its loading door sliding shut behind it. Clara checked her weapon, then looked at Jamal. You should go. This is where it gets dangerous. I've been living on these streets for 3 years, he said, his voice steady. I know dangerous. She wanted to argue, but there was no time, and truthfully she needed him. He knew this area, knew how to move unseen, and right now she couldn't trust anyone else. They circled the building, finding a fire escape leading to a row of broken windows on the second floor. Jamal went first, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd navigated such paths countless times. Clara followed, ignoring the voice in her head, screaming about procedure violations. Inside the warehouse was dark, but lights glowed from the far end. They crept along the catwalks, the rain on the metal roof masking their footsteps. Below, Clara saw several vehicles, including the van and men unloading equipment. "Look," Jamal whispered, pointing. On a table, lit by work lights, maps and photos were spread out patrol routes for her precinct photos of officers, including one of herself. "They're targeting cops," she breathed. "No," Jamal corrected, studying the setup. "They're targeting specific cops. Look at the photos. Some are marked with red X's, others circled." Clara's photo had a question mark. "They're sorting them," she realized, deciding who's with them and who's not. Her radio crackled again, this time with voices dispatch, standard chatter. But now she wondered who else was listening, cataloging every response, every location. One of the men below pulled out a phone, and even from their distance, Clara could hear his side of the conversation. "Yes, sir. The virus is uploaded. No Hayes got away, but it doesn't matter. Yes, the captain is expecting our report tomorrow night as planned." Clara's blood went cold. The captain, her Captain Morrison, was involved. He'd been her mentor, the one who'd encouraged her when others dismissed her as too soft, too idealistic. He'd been like a father to her after her brother's death. "We need to get out of here," Jamal said urgently. "Get evidence, then figure out who we can trust." But as they turned to leave, a hand fell on Jamal's shoulder. They'd been so focused on the scene below, they hadn't heard someone climb up behind them. "Well, well," a voice said. "What do we have here?" Clara spun her hand, instinctively reaching for her weapon, but she froze when she saw who stood before them. Officer Danny Brooks. Her partner of 6 months stood on the catwalk, his familiar face twisted into a cold smile that didn't match the man she thought she knew. Relief flooded through her for a split second, back up someone she trusted, until his words cut through the illusion. "Hayes, you're causing more problems than you know," he said, his voice low, almost regretful. "Can't have that." The betrayal hit like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. She'd shared meals with Brooks, laughed over coffee during late-night shifts, trusted him to watch her back in dangerous situations. "You're one of them," she said, her voice steady, despite the shock. Brooks laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed off the warehouse's metal walls. "One of them, Clara, we are them. The whole department, or at least the ones smart enough to see which way the wind's blowing." Jamal tensed beside her, his body coiled like a spring ready to run or fight. Clara's mind raced, calculating odds. Brooks hadn't drawn his weapon yet, which meant he wanted them alive for now. Why, she asked, buying time? Why betray everything we swore to do? Brooks shook his head, stepping closer, his boots heavy on the catwalk. "Our oath. Look around you, Hayes. We risk our lives every day for what mediocre pay no respect, and a city that spits on us. The captain showed us a better way, protection for those who pay, elimination of those who don't. Real power. Real money." Clara's stomach churned. "That's not what we swore to do. Our oath was to protect and serve." Brooks said, his voice hardening. "Now we protect those worth protecting and serve our own interests. You could have been part of it, Clara. The captain wanted to bring you in, but you're too much of a Girl Scout." Voices called from below, sharp and urgent. They'd been spotted. "Time's up," Brooks said, finally reaching for his weapon. "Let's go, both of you." But Jamal had been waiting for this moment. In a flash, he grabbed a rusted pipe from the catwalk and swung it at the overhead light. The bulb shattered, plunging them into darkness. Clara heard Brooks curse, heard the click of his weapon clearing its holster. "Run!" she shouted, grabbing Jamal and pulling him toward the broken windows they'd entered through. A shot rang out, the sound deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet sparking off the metal where they'd stood seconds before. They crashed onto the fire escape, the rain soaking them instantly as they scrambled down, shouts and footsteps echoing from below as men poured out of the warehouse. Engines roared to life. The hunt was on. Jamal yanked Clara into a narrow alley so tight they had to turn sideways to fit. At the far end, he lifted a camouflaged piece of plywood, revealing a hole in the fence. They squeezed through, just as headlights swept the alley's entrance, landing in a homeless encampment under an overpass. Faces turned toward them, eyes wary but silent. These were Jamal's people, and they knew better than to get involved. Clara's heart pounded as they kept moving, finally stopping in an abandoned subway entrance, both gasping for breath. Her radio crackled constantly now, voices she recognized coordinating a search for her. "They're saying you went rogue," Jamal said, listening. "That you attacked a fellow officer, that you're unstable." Clara laughed bitterly. "Of course they are. Control the narrative. Control the response." She looked at this kid who'd saved her life twice in one night. "I'm sorry, you're in this now because of me?" "No," Jamal said firmly. "I'm in this because it's the right thing. Because maybe this time someone will listen." Clara pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts. Who could she trust? If Captain Morrison was dirty, who else was compromised? "There's one person," she said finally. "Detective Rivera from Internal Affairs. Everyone hates IA, which means they probably didn't bother trying to turn her." "You sure?" Jamal asked, his eyes scanning the shadows. "No, but we need help and we need it fast." She dialed her voice low as Rivera answered. "Maria, it's Clara Hayes. I need help. I need you to listen very carefully." There was a pause. "Clara, there's a bolo out on you. They're saying you—" "I know what they're saying. It's all lies. Maria, the department is compromised. The Captain Brooks, maybe more. They're working with someone planning something big." Another pause, longer this time. "Where are you?" Clara hesitated. This was the moment of truth. Either Rivera was clean, or they were walking into a trap. Jamal touched her arm. "Trust someone," he said quietly. "We can't do this alone." Clara gave Rivera their location. "Come alone, please." They waited, intense, the rain having stopped, leaving only the drip of water from the rusted ceiling above. Clara's radio had gone quiet, which felt more ominous than the chatter. "Thank you," she said suddenly to Jamal, "for warning me, for staying. You didn't have to do any of this." He shrugged, but she saw the emotion in his eyes. "Nobody helped my mom. Maybe if someone had been brave enough to listen, to act." He trailed off. "We'll stop them," Clara promised. "Whatever they're planning, we'll stop them." "It's tomorrow night," Jamal said. "Whatever the big plan is, that's what the man said on the phone." A car pulled up outside, its engine idling. Clara drew her weapon, pushing Jamal behind her. Footsteps approached, careful, but not stealthy. Clara Rivera's voice called, "I'm alone." Clara emerged slowly, weapon still drawn. Detective Maria Rivera stood in the entrance, hands visible, her expression concerned, but not hostile. "Put the gun down, Hayes. If I was here to arrest you, I'd have brought backup." Clara lowered her weapon slightly. "How do I know you're not one of them?" "Because I've been investigating irregularities in the department for months." Rivera said. Missing evidence, altered reports, suspicious patterns. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it. Until now. She looked past Clara to Jamal. Who's the kid? The only person I trust right now, Clara said. He saved my life. Rivera studied them both, then made a decision. Get in the car, both of you. We need to get somewhere safe and figure out what the hell is going on. As they walked to the car, Jamal whispered to Clara, You sure about this? Clara looked at the teenager who'd risked everything for a stranger then at Rivera, who'd come alone despite the risk. No, she admitted, but sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. They got in not knowing if they were driving toward salvation or another trap, but their fragile alliance had grown by one, and tomorrow night was coming fast. Rivera's car moved through the empty streets. The city quiet, except for the occasional siren in the distance. Clara sat in the front, her compromised radio silent on her belt, while Jamal watched from the back, cataloging every turn, every landmark, always planning an escape route. We need to go back to the warehouse district, Clara said, breaking the silence. There's evidence. There. Maps, photos, plans. That's suicide. Rivera replied, checking her mirrors for the third time. They'll be expecting you. Not if we're smart about it. Jamal leaned forward. There's more than one warehouse down there. They can't watch them all. Rivera glanced at him in the mirror. How does a kid know so much about the warehouse district? It's where people go when they don't want to be found, Jamal said simply. The homeless runaways, people hiding from something. I've spent enough nights there to know every building, every entrance. Clara turned to look at him. You can get us in without being seen. Maybe. But we need to know what we're looking for first. Rivera pulled into an underground parking garage, the fluorescent lights harsh after the darkness. Before we do anything, I need to show you both something. She led them to a service elevator using a key card Clara didn't recognize. They descended to a sublevel that shouldn't exist according to any building plans Clara knew. What is this place? She asked as they emerged into a small windowless room filled with file boxes and computer equipment. My insurance policy, Rivera said. 6 months ago, I started noticing things, evidence going missing. Case files, altered witnesses, changing their stories. Every time I tried to investigate through official channels, I hit walls, so I started keeping copies of everything here. She pulled out a box marked with a recent date. Look at this. Inside were photos, reports, financial documents. Clara recognized faces, officers from her precinct, and others, but also business owners, city officials, even a judge. It's not just the police, Rivera explained. It's a whole network, protection rackets, drug trafficking, human smuggling. They've built a shadow system within the legitimate one. Jamal picked up a photo, his face going pale. I know her. Clara and Rivera looked at the image, a middle-aged black woman in medical scrubs. That's Dr. Patricia Williams, Rivera said. She disappeared 2 years ago after reporting irregularities at her clinic. That's my mother, Jamal whispered. Her name was Patricia Washington, not Williams, but that's her. Rivera's eyes widened. Your mother was the whistleblower. Clara put a hand on Jamal's shoulder, feeling him tremble. Did she ever tell you where she kept her files? She was paranoid near the end. Jamal said, his voice thick. Said she had insurance, something hidden, where only I would know to look. But she disappeared before she could tell me where. Think, Rivera urged. Any place special to both of you, somewhere she might have felt was safe. Jamal closed his eyes, remembering. There was this old warehouse where we used to go when I was younger. She'd take me there to watch the sunset from the roof. Said it was our secret place where we could see the whole city, but the city couldn't see us. Which warehouse? Clara asked. Building 7 in the industrial district. It's been abandoned for years. Rivera grabbed her keys. Then that's where we're going. They drove through the dark streets. Clara's radio crackling to life with an old song her brother used to love. Then a voice, Captain Morrison's, familiar yet sinister. "Officer Hayes, we know you're listening." Clara's hand froze on the radio. "You've involved civilians in police business. That's unfortunate. Turn yourself in and we'll ensure the boy isn't hurt." She reached to respond, but Jamal stopped her. "Don't. They're tracking it somehow." "Smart kid." Morrison's voice continued as if he could hear them. "Your mother was smart, too. Too smart for her own good. We have eyes everywhere, Clara, every camera, every informant, every corner of this city. You can't hide forever, and when we find you, that boy will pay for your stubbornness." The radio went dead. "Pull over," Clara said. Rivera complied, pulling into an empty lot. Clara got out, removed her radio, and threw it into a storm drain. "No more games," she said, getting back in. "We get the evidence, then we burn their whole operation down." They parked 3 blocks from Building 7, approaching on foot through the shadows. The warehouse loomed above its broken windows like empty eyes. Jamal led them to a section of fence that looked solid, but swung open on hidden hinges. "Your mom set this up?" Clara asked. Together, Jamal said, "Our escape route if things went bad." Inside the warehouse was a maze of rusted machinery and empty crates. Jamal moved through it like he'd been born there, leading them to a service ladder to the 3rd floor. "She'd always check this brick," he said, running his hand along the wall. He pushed one, then another, until one shifted. Behind it was a small space, and inside, wrapped in plastic, was a flash drive and a notebook. Clara shone her flashlight on the notebook as Jamal opened it with shaking hands. His mother's handwriting filled the pages, names, dates, transactions, a complete record of the conspiracy's operations. She documented everything. Rivera breathed. This is enough to bring down the entire network. But their celebration was short-lived. Lights blazed from below, flooding the warehouse with harsh illumination. They'd been found. "Move!" Clara shouted, but it was too late. Men in tactical gear swarmed the building, their movements coordinated, professional. They ran deeper into the warehouse, feet clanging on metal catwalks, as the men below spread out, cutting off exits. "This way," Jamal said, leading them through a hole in the wall to an adjacent building connected by a precarious plank bridge that groaned under their weight. Shouts and boots on metal followed them. In the second building, Jamal guided them to a dead end, then pushed aside a sheet of corrugated metal to reveal a hidden passage. They crawled through, emerging in a mechanical room filled with old HVAC equipment. "Wait," Clara said, hearing voices, not their pursuers but others. She peered through a ventilation grate and saw a massive room below, filled with activity. Tables held weapons, drugs, stacks of money, and in the center, men studied architectural blueprints. "That's City Hall," Rivera whispered, recognizing the plans. "They're planning an attack." "No," Clara corrected, studying the markings. "Not an attack. Look at the patrol routes. They're planning to replace security during the commissioner's address tomorrow night. They'll control the entire building." The pieces fell into place. The commissioner was announcing an anti-corruption task force, and they were going to kill him, blame it on her and Jamal, a rogue cop and a street kid, the perfect fall guys. Clara's heart pounded as she peered through the ventilation grate. The blueprints of City Hall spread out below like a map to their doom. The men in the room moved with cold efficiency, unloading crates of weapons and stacking cash in neat piles. Their voices low, but carrying fragments of their plan control. "The building eliminate, the commissioner pin it on a rogue cop and a street kid. The realization hit her like a punch. They weren't just targeting the commissioner, they were orchestrating a massacre to silence anyone who threatened their network. Jamal crouched beside her, his eyes locked on the scene, his phone quietly recording every detail, despite the danger. Rivera pressed against the wall, whispered, "This is bigger than we thought. They're not just corrupt cops. They're running a full operation. Drugs, weapons, trafficking." Clara nodded, her mind racing. "We need to get this evidence out, but we're trapped." Footsteps echoed in the passage they'd just crawled through, heavy and deliberate. Someone was coming. "There's another way out," Jamal whispered, pointing to an old garbage chute in the corner of the mechanical room. "But it's a straight drop into the bay. 30 feet, maybe more." Rivera's face paled. "I can't swim." "We don't have a choice," Clara said as the footsteps grew closer. She could hear the clink of tactical gear, the low murmur of voices coordinating their approach. The man with the scar from the alley appeared in the passageway, his weapon drawn, his eyes locking onto them. "Officer Hayes," he said, his voice calm but laced with menace. "We've been looking for you." Clara didn't hesitate. She shoved Rivera toward the chute, helping her slide in feet first, then turned to Jamal. "Go." He shook his head, his jaw set. "Not without you." Before she could argue, the scarred man fired the bullet, sparking off the metal wall inches from her head. Clara dove backward into the chute, pulling Jamal with her. The fall was a heart-stopping plunge, the cold, dark water of the bay hitting them like a wall, driving the air from their lungs. Clara surfaced, gasping, her body screaming from the impact. Jamal was already there, supporting Rivera, who was coughing and panicking in the water. "I've got her," Jamal said, his voice steady, despite the chaos. They struggled to a concrete pier, pulling themselves up as searchlights swept the water behind them. Clara checked the plastic-wrapped notebook and flash drive in her pocket, still intact, though soaked. "We need to get this to someone who can act on it," Rivera said through chattering teeth. "Someone outside the city's jurisdiction. The FBI. They'll be watching the field office." Jamal pointed out his breath, coming in short bursts. "Then we make copies first," Clara said, thinking fast. "Upload it somewhere safe." Rivera nodded. "I have a secure server, but we need to get to my equipment." Jamal, still clutching his mother's notebook, flipped through it as they caught their breath. "There's something else here," he said. His voice low. Names of clean cops, ones she was sure weren't compromised. Clara read the list over his shoulder, 12 names. All officers she recognized, idealistic ones, the kind mocked by cynical veterans. "We need to contact them," she said. "If we're going to stop this, we need help from inside." "I can reach out," Rivera said carefully. "But Clara, even if we get the evidence out, they still have tomorrow night. They still have their plan." Jamal looked up, his eyes fierce despite the exhaustion etched into his face. "Then we stop them. We save the commissioner, expose the conspiracy, and bring them all down." Rivera raised an eyebrow. "The three of us against an army of corrupt cops and mercenaries." "4," Jamal corrected. "My mom's with us. Her work, her sacrifice, it all leads to tomorrow night." They moved through the city, sticking to the shadows, avoiding main roads where cameras or informants might spot them. Jamal led them to an abandoned church, its stained glass windows dark, its doors chained shut for years. He knew a way in through the basement, a route he'd used on the coldest nights when shelters were full and the streets too dangerous. Inside, they huddled in what had once been the priest's office, a single candle providing flickering light. Rivera set up her laptop, connecting to a hidden Wi-Fi network she'd rigged for emergencies. "I'm uploading the evidence to multiple secure servers," she said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. 3 federal agencies and 2 journalists I trust. If something happens to us, the truth will still get out. Jamal studied his mother's notebook, absorbing every detail, his fingers tracing her handwriting. She knew about the commissioner's speech, he said, pointing to a page. She wrote about it months ago. They've been planning this for a long time. Clara read over his shoulder. Patricia Washington's notes were meticulous meetings, overheard shipments of weapons disguised as medical supplies, cops whose debts were suddenly paid off. Your mother was brilliant, Clara said softly. This would stand up in any court. Lot of good it did her, Jamal said, his voice bitter. Hey. Clara sat beside him. She saved lives with this. We're going to finish what she started. Jamal was quiet for a moment, then nodded. She used to say courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about doing the right thing, despite the fear. She was terrified those last weeks, I could see it. But she kept gathering evidence, kept pushing. She sounds like an incredible woman, Clara said. She was, Jamal replied. And they killed her for it. Rivera closed her laptop, uploaded. But Clara's right, we need to move. I reached out to talk two of the clean cops on the list. They'll meet us at dawn, but not here, where Clara asked. Riverside Park. Public enough that our friends can't just grab us, but isolated enough for a private conversation. They left the church separately, taking different routes to avoid detection. Jamal led them through a network of alleys and abandoned buildings, spaces invisible to most, but familiar to those who lived on the margins. Clara's burner phone buzzed, a cheap device she'd bought with cash, their only uncompromised line of communication. Hey, she answered. Clara, thank God. It was Officer Susan Marks, one of the clean cops on Patricia's list. I got Rivera's message. This is insane. The captain, Brooks. How many others? Too many, Clara said. Susan, we need people we can trust tomorrow night. I know. The commissioner's speech. Clara, there's something else. They put out a kill order on you. Not an arrest warrant. They want you dead. And the kid with you. Clara glanced at Jamal, who was helping Rivera navigate a treacherous section of alley. We have evidence, Susan. Enough to bury them all. Then stay alive long enough to use it. I'll see you at dawn. They found shelter in a shipping container Jamal had set up as an emergency hideout months ago. Inside were blankets, water bottles, canned food, survival supplies for someone who'd learned never to count on tomorrow. You've got safe houses all over the city, Rivera observed, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Not safe houses, Jamal said, opening a can of beans and offering it to them. Just options. Never know when you'll need to disappear. As they ate cold beans in the darkness, Clara thought about the strange path that had led them here, a decorated cop, an internal affairs detective, and a homeless teenager. Can I ask you something? Jamal said to Clara. Why'd you become a cop? She considered the question. My brother was 15 when he died, shot by gang members who were never caught. I watched the detectives work his case, saw how hard they tried, even when the leads went cold. I wanted to be like them, to protect other kids, other families. But the system's broken, Jamal pointed out. Parts of it, yeah, but not all of it. There are still good cops, good people trying to make a difference. Your mother's list proves that. 12 names out of thousands, Jamal said. 12 she was certain about. There are more people who join for the right reasons, who still believe in protecting and serving. We just need to remind them what that means. Rivera, who'd been silent, spoke up. My father was a cop, 20 years on the force, never took a dime he didn't earn. He killed himself when I was 16, left a note saying he couldn't stand watching the department rot from the inside. That's why I joined IA, to fight the rot. They sat in silence, three people bound by loss and a shared desire for justice. Tomorrow night, Clara said finally, we stop them. We save the commissioner, expose the conspiracy, and honor everyone who died trying to reveal the truth. How? Rivera asked. We've got evidence, but they control the security. The communications probably half the cops there. Jamal pulled out a piece of paper sketching a rough map of City Hall from memory. I've been in there before. Homeless services are in the basement. I know the layout, the blind spots. You're not going in there, Clara said immediately. It's too dangerous. You need me, Jamal insisted. I can get places you can't see, things you'd miss. My mother died for this. I'm not sitting on the sidelines. Before Clara could argue, her burner phone buzzed an unknown number. Don't answer that, Rivera warned, but something made Clara pick up. Yeah, Officer Hayes, a distorted voice said. You don't know me, but I know you. I know what you're trying to do. Who is this? Someone who's been watching from the inside for a long time. The commissioner's speech is a trap, but not the one you think. They're not just going to kill him, they're going to massacre everyone who opposes them. Clean cops, honest politicians, journalists. One massive false flag operation to seize control of the city. Clara's blood went cold. How do you know this? Because I helped plan it before I grew a conscience. Listen carefully. There are 3 teams, one for the commissioner, one for the witnesses, one for the evidence plant. You can't stop all 3. Then, what do you suggest? Turn their trap against them. They expect you to try to save the commissioner, so don't. Save everyone else. And Hayes trusts the kid. He sees what others miss. The line went dead. Rivera had been listening. It could be a trap. Or it could be someone like us, Jamal said. Someone who wants to do the right thing but is trapped in the wrong place. Clara made a decision. We proceed as planned, but we adjust for this new information. Rivera, can you get those clean cops to focus on protecting the civilians? Maybe if they believe us when they see the evidence. As dawn approached, they made their way to Riverside Park, the city waking up around them, joggers and dog walkers providing cover. Susan Marks and Detective Ray Thompson were waiting by the fountain, both looking nervous. Clara, Susan said, pulling her into a quick hug. Everyone thinks you've lost it. The story they're spinning is a lie, Clara said. Ray? Susan, what I'm about to show you will change everything. She pulled out the flash drive, but Ray stepped back. How do we know this isn't some elaborate setup? How do we know you haven't been turned? Jamal answered before Clara could. Because they killed my mother for this evidence. Because they're planning to murder dozens of innocent people tonight. Because if we don't act, the city falls into their hands. Ray studied the teenager. You're Patricia Washington's son. I remember her. She came to me once trying to report something. I didn't listen. Thought she was paranoid. Everyone did. That's how they've gotten away with it for so long. Jamal said, no accusation in his voice, just fact. Rivera opened her laptop, showing them the evidence, photos, documents, recorded conversations. Susan's face went pale as she recognized fellow officers in compromising positions. My God, she breathed. How deep does this go? All the way to the top, Clara said. But we can stop them tonight. During the commissioner's speech, they'll make their move. We need to be ready. You're asking us to go against our own department, Ray said. I'm asking you to save it, Clara corrected. To be the cops we swore to be. Susan looked at Ray, then back at Clara. What do you need? They spent the next hour planning using Jamal's knowledge of City Hall's layout and the clean cops' access to create a counter-strategy. It was dangerous, probably suicidal, but it was their only chance. As they prepared to separate, Jamal pulled Clara aside. "That person on the phone, they said to trust me. But I need you to trust me too. There's something I haven't told you." "What?" "My mother didn't just leave evidence. She left contacts, people in the shadows who've been waiting for the right moment. If things go bad tonight, I can call them. People who exist outside the system, who've been preparing for this." Clara studied him, this 17-year-old kid who'd survived on the streets, who'd saved her life, who carried his mother's legacy like a shield. "I trust you," she said. "Whatever happens tonight, I trust you." As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the park, they dispersed, each carrying their piece of the plan. Jamal melted into the crowd, just another homeless kid in a city that ignored them. But Clara knew better. He was their secret weapon, the element their enemies would never see coming. Tonight, the conspirators would learn what Patricia Washington had known, that courage wasn't about being fearless, but about doing the right thing despite the fear. And tonight, her son would prove that sometimes the smallest voice could create the biggest echo. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city as Clara, Jamal, and Rivera converged near City Hall from different directions, their paths carefully planned to avoid detection. They'd spent the day apart, each preparing their piece of the counter-strategy, and now, with only hours before the commissioner's speech, they met in a crowded food truck parking lot 2 blocks away, blending into the chaos of office workers and tourists grabbing lunch. Clara bought a coffee from a vendor, her movements casual, but her eyes scanning for threats. "Status?" she asked, keeping her voice low. Rivera, sipping a soda to blend in, leaned closer. "Susan and Ray have 6 more clean cops ready to help. They're already inside, positioned at key points." Jamal, clutching a hot chocolate someone had bought him, added, "The Shadow Network is on standby. They won't intervene unless things go south." Clara noticed he looked different, cleaner in clothes that actually fit. "Where'd you get those? Susan brought them," he said, shrugging. "Said I'd stand out less if I looked like I belonged." A news van pulled up nearby and Clara tensed until Rivera gave a subtle nod. "That's our journalist contact. She'll be filming everything, streaming live so they can't suppress the footage." They watched City Hall's main entrance, where security was ramping up metal detectors. Bag checks, uniformed officers everywhere. But Clara knew the real threat was already inside, embedded in the system like a virus. Jamal's eyes narrowed, pointing subtly. There. The black van from the warehouse district was parked in an official vehicle spot, its presence a quiet taunt. "They're here," Clara said, her stomach tightening. Her burner phone buzzed and Susan's voice came through tense. "We've got a problem. They're redirecting all the clean cops to perimeter duty. They're isolating us from the main event. Then we adapt." Clara replied, "Stick to your positions. Watch for the 3 teams our source mentioned." As they spoke, Jamal's gaze darted across the street. "We're being watched," he murmured. "Homeless guy, corner of the block. His shoes are too new, posture too alert." Rivera casually turned, using her phone's camera as a mirror. "I see him. Another one by the hot dog cart." The net was closing in. "Split up," Clara ordered. "Stick to the plan. We meet inside." They dispersed into the crowd, Jamal toward the service entrance he'd mapped out, Rivera toward the press entrance with fake credentials, and Clara straight for the main entrance where she'd be most expected. As Clara approached the metal detectors, she spotted Captain Morrison standing with the security chief, his eyes locking onto hers. He smiled, cold and predatory. "Officer Hayes," he called loud enough for every cop in the area to hear. "Shouldn't you be on administrative leave?" Heads turned, hands rested on weapons. Clara kept walking, her expression neutral. "I'm here for the commissioner's speech, sir." "Same as every year." Not this year, Morrison said, stepping forward. You're under investigation. You shouldn't be here unless you've got formal charges to answer for. I have every right to attend a public event. Clara shot back, her voice steady. Morrison's smile widened. Actually, I do have charges, Hayes. You're under arrest for conspiracy assault on a fellow officer and suspected terrorism. The uniformed cops moved in, but Susan Marks stepped between them, her face a mask of professionalism. Captain, I'll handle this. Hayes, come with me. Morrison's eyes narrowed. Marks, I gave you an order, and I'm following it, sir, Susan said, gripping Clara's arm, but her touch was gentle, a signal. As Susan led her away, Clara heard Morrison speak into his radio. Target 1 is in play. Proceed to Phase 2. They ducked into a side corridor, and Susan quickly uncuffed her. Ray's already inside. Morrison's got about 30 dirty cops in there, but there are twice as many who don't know what's happening. Then we use that, Clara said. When this goes down, the good cops will react instinctively to protect civilians if we can prove who the bad guys are. She pulled out a small device Rivera had given her, a signal jammer. When I activate this, only our encrypted radios will work. Their coordination goes to hell. Meanwhile, Jamal slipped through the service entrance past distracted guards focused on the main approaches. The basement was exactly as he remembered, a maze of storage rooms and utility corridors dimly lit and smelling of mildew. He moved quickly, heading for the mechanical room overlooking the main auditorium. But as he rounded a corner, he froze. The tall man with the scar stood there examining what looked like explosive devices, their timers glowing faintly in the dark. I wondered when you'd show up, the man said without turning. The Washington boy. Your mother spoke about you before the end. Jamal's hands clenched, his voice low and steady. You killed her? No, the man said, turning to face him, his eyes cold. I just asked questions. Others handled the wet work. He studied Jamal, his scarred eyebrow twitching slightly. You look like her. Same stubborn jaw. What are you planning? Jamal asked, his hand inching toward a loose pipe on the wall. The man laughed, a hollow sound. Planning, boy, it's already done. Charges set in 3 locations. When they detonate, the building comes down. Commissioner, honest cops, journalists, you and your friend Hayes. All dead. Tomorrow the city wakes up to martial law with our people in charge. You're going to kill hundreds of innocent people, Jamal said, his voice shaking with rage. Innocent. The man's expression hardened. There are no innocent people, just those who are useful, and those who are in the way. Your mother was in the way. Now you are too. He pulled out a knife, the same ceramic blade from the alley, its edge catching the faint light. Jamal backed up his hand, closing around the pipe. You talk too much, he said, yanking the pipe free. Water sprayed everywhere, blinding the scarred man momentarily. Jamal ran, the man's curses echoing behind him. He had to warn the others about the bombs. In the main auditorium, Rivera had positioned herself with the press pool, her camera ready, blending in with the journalists. The commissioner was on stage checking his notes as the room filled with city officials, community leaders, and cops in dress uniforms, all potential victims. Her encrypted radio crackled with Jamal's breathless voice. Bombs. 3 locations. They're going to bring down the building. Rivera's blood went cold. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on a janitor's cart, positioned oddly near a support column, another by the emergency exit. The third would be, she looked up, likely in the lighting rig above the stage. She keyed her radio. Clara, we need a bomb squad now. Can't trust them, Clara responded, her voice tight. Half might be dirty. We handle this ourselves. "We're not trained for this," Rivera hissed. "Jamal is Susan's voice cut in. "Kid lived on the streets, learned from some interesting people." Jamal Clara said, "Can you walk us through disarming them?" "Maybe," he replied, "but we need to find them all first." The commissioner began his speech, his voice booming through the hall, talking about cleaning up corruption, the irony thick enough to choke on. Clara, positioned at the back of the room, watched Morrison near the stage, ostensibly providing security but really coordinating his teams. She saw him touch his earpiece, frowning. Their communications were faltering as she gradually increased the jammer's range. Then she spotted him, the masked man from the warehouse, now dressed as a security guard, moving toward the commissioner. But something was off. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was reaching for a detonator. "They're not going to shoot him," Clara said into her radio. "They're going to blow the building with everyone inside. Blame it on us." The bombs aren't just for killing Rivera, realized. They're to destroy evidence. If the building comes down, any proof of who's behind this gets buried. Jamal reached the janitor's cart by the support column, his heart racing as he found the explosive device hidden among cleaning supplies, military grade, with a timer showing 12 minutes. "I found one," he reported. "Timer's already running." "Can you stop it?" Clara asked. Jamal examined the device, his mind flashing back to Marcus, a former Army EOD specialist who'd lived in the tent city by the river. Marcus had taught him about survival, including how to recognize and handle dangerous devices. "Yeah, but it'll take time. And if I do it wrong?" "Do what you can," Clara said. "Everyone else find the other bombs." The timer showed 10 minutes as Jamal worked his hands steady, despite the sweat dripping down his face. The auditorium hummed with the commissioner's speech, the audience oblivious to the danger. Clara moved closer to the stage, keeping an eye on the masked man, Detective Carl Preston. She now realized someone she'd trusted years ago. Morrison noticed her approach and stepped to intercept. "Hayes, you're supposed to be in custody." "Change of plans, Captain," she said, her voice hard. His hand went to his weapon. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "You mean, don't stop you from murdering hundreds of people?" Morrison's expression didn't change. "I don't know what you're talking about, but you're clearly unstable." Officers restrain her. Two cops moved forward, but Ray Thompson stepped between them. "I'll handle this, Captain." Thompson, stand down. "No, sir," Ray said, his voice firm. "Not until I understand and what's happening here." More cops turned, sensing the tension. The commissioner paused his speech, noticing the disturbance. "Is there a problem?" he called from the stage. Morrison forced a smile. "No, sir, just a minor security issue." But Preston had seen enough. He pulled off his mask, revealing his face to Clara. "Time's up," he said, his thumb on the detonator, his expression calm. "Preston, don't!" Clara shouted. Everyone turned to look. Preston stood, detonator raised. "You should have stayed out of this, Hayes. All of you should have." The commissioner's security detail moved to surround him, but Preston laughed. "You think that matters? When I press this, everyone dies. The corrupt, the clean, the innocent. A clean slate for a new beginning." "You're insane," Clara said. "Am I?" Preston's voice was bitter. "I spent 15 years fighting corruption from the inside. You know what it got me? Threats, isolation, watching good cops turn bad or turn up dead. Like your brother." Clara froze. "What about my brother?" Preston's expression flickered. "Your brother was a good kid. Tried to expose the drug running in his precinct. They made it look like a gang hit." Clara's world tilted. Her brother hadn't been killed by gangs, he'd been murdered by cops. "I tried to investigate." Preston continued. "Morrison shut me down, threatened my family. So I started planning. If I couldn't save the system, I'd destroy it. Behind him, Susan had reached the lighting rig, hidden by the shadows, working on the third bomb. But you're not destroying the system. Jamal's voice rang out. He stood up from behind the pillar, the first bomb disarmed in his hands. You're just killing innocent people like they killed my mother. Preston turned his eyes, narrowing. The Washington kid. Your mother was brave. Stupid, but brave. She was trying to help people, same as Officer Hayes, same as the commissioner. You're not fighting corruption. You're just another murderer. Morrison had been edging toward his weapon, but the crowd of cops around him included both dirty and clean, and he couldn't act without exposing himself. 6 minutes, Rivera reported quietly, still working on the second bomb by the emergency exit. Preston's thumb tightened on the detonator. Enough talk. Everyone dies. The lights went out, plunging the auditorium into darkness. Clara heard a struggle, a grunt of pain, then the emergency lighting kicked in. Preston was on the ground, Jamal standing over him, the detonator in his hand. Nobody dies tonight, Jamal said. But Morrison had used the darkness to draw his weapon. He fired at Jamal, the bullet catching him in the shoulder, spinning him around. No, Clara launched herself at Morrison, tackling him as he tried to fire again. The auditorium erupted in chaos, some cops evacuating civilians, others unsure who to arrest or protect. The commissioner was rushed off stage by his security detail. Susan's voice came over the radio, third bomb disarmed. Second one too, Rivera added. But Preston was laughing, blood running from his nose where Jamal had hit him. You think you've won? The detonator was a decoy. The real trigger is on a timer. 4 minutes now. Clara's heart sank. They'd been played. Everyone out, she shouted. Bomb threat. Evacuate now. The stampede began, people pushing toward exits, but Clara knew they'd never get everyone out in time. Jamal, bleeding from his shoulder, struggled to his feet. There's a kill switch. Has to be. They wouldn't risk getting caught in their own trap. He was right. Clara looked at Morrison, now restrained by Ray Thompson. The captain was too calm. She searched his pockets, finding a small device, a second detonator with 2 buttons, arm and disarm. How do we know which is which? Rivera asked, appearing beside them. We don't, Clara said. Yes, we do, Jamal said, weakly pointing at Preston. He's scared now. He wasn't before. That means the bombs are really armed. Clara looked at the device. 2 buttons, no labels. The auditorium was still half full, people struggling to escape. Everyone back, she shouted. Give me room. She looked at Jamal, this brave kid who'd saved her life, who carried his mother's torch. Together she asked. He nodded, putting his hand over hers on the device. On 3, Clara said. 1, 2. They pressed the button. Nothing happened for a heartbeat, then another. The timer on Rivera's phone showed 30 seconds remaining. Then a beep. The bomb's timers stopped. Relief flooded through Clara as she pulled Jamal into a hug, careful of his wounded shoulder. Around them, cops were arresting Morrison, Preston, and others identified as conspirators. The commissioner, watching from the stage door, approached. Officer Hayes, Mr. Washington. I understand I owe you my life, all our lives. Just doing our job, Sir Clara said. No, the commissioner said firmly. You did far more than that. You exposed a cancer in our department, risked everything to stop it. He looked at Jamal. Young man, your mother would be proud. Her evidence, combined with what happened here tonight, will ensure justice is served. Jamal swayed, the adrenaline fading. Clara caught him as he started to fall. We need medics here, she called. As EMTs rushed over, Jamal looked up at her. We did it. We stopped them. Yeah, kid, Clara said, her voice thick. We did.